Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director for Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including Tableau, Microsoft, Pivotal, Oracle, IBM, and Teradata, to name just a few. Past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. If you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Today's webinar is entitled Data Analytics with Amazon Redshift, a Success Story. Now, before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be 1 hour long. We'll have 4 panelists that I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be a 10 to 15 minute QA following the presentation. And this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com in the next few days following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the QA portion of today's event. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Michael Ruiz from Amazon Web Services, Dan Boyce and Joseph Portello with Sager Creek Vegetable Company, and Maimoona Block with Alteryx. Now, Michael is an AWS solutions architect with more than 20 years of industry experience spanning healthcare, enterprise, public sector, hybrid cloud, and extreme scale mobile and gaming verticals. Michael's a passionate technologist who currently focuses his energies on the technical enablement of AWS partner network members, ranging from garage startups to Fortune 100 companies, driving higher quality and solution delivery and superior customer experiences through the use of AWS Cloud technologies. Dan is Senior Director of Business Intelligence and is constantly challenged by the analytical questions and demands for a company that deals in the production, supply, and all the planning challenges that come with perishable goods business. He's been in analytics and business intelligence for over 10 years. Joseph specializes in the development of business intelligence-driven applications. He's worked with data integration of systems for the last 6 years and worked with cloud architecture for the previous 5, driving business interaction needs at any scale. Maimoona works with Alteryx technology partners on systems integration and advanced analytics solutions success stories. She's worked in software and technology partnerships for over 10 years. So thanks all of you for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. In today's DCS webinar, you'll learn how business intelligence and system integration teams from Sager Creek have improved distribution, management, demand planning, and promotional pricing and more. We'll discuss how they enabled multi-source and high-volume data blending through a cloud data warehouse, consumable data workflows to internal customers, and predictive analytics through a system that requires no coding. You'll learn how to implement a cloud data warehouse, data blending, and visual analytics solution that spans multiple business groups and has helped Sager Creek enhance business insight. Maimoona, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Great, thanks, Bill. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Bill had mentioned data blending, so I just wanted to start with a little bit of background on that, if you're not familiar with that term. So when we say data blending, we're referring to the process of combining data from multiple sources to reveal deeper business intelligence. And usually it's used by analysts to solve a specific business question or drive a particular business process. So if you're hearing us use the word data blending, this is about joining data, cleaning data, and analyzing data. So with that said, I really want to just start with a really brief overview of an analytic journey, and where a lot of people are coming from in this process. And this is titled Data Warehousing, Data Blending, and the Analytic Process. But really, I just wanted to go through, I think, what most people find, which is possibly they're starting with a business understanding. And that's the requirements and the objectives from the BI perspective. And really starting to make a preliminary plan to access their data and try and figure out, okay, we know what questions we have. How are we going to get to this point where we can answer these questions? And then possibly they're moving into the data understanding period. So you want to understand what kind of data you have to access. How many sources do you have? What kind of volume of data? What kind of frequency of data are you dealing with? What do you need to really overall tap into this data to answer the business questions that you've prefaced? Then there's also data preparation. So how do you construct this data for use? So you might have multi-sources of data, you have high frequencies of data, call logs that are coming in every day. So how do you really construct this data for use? And how do you really make it usable for your business intelligent teams? It needs to be transformed, and it needs to be ready and usable. Then folks usually move into a modeling stage. So at this point, you can test your techniques, and you're really looking back and seeing, is this technique working, and is it optimal for creating the data set I need? And regardless of if you're on the systems integration side or the BI side or upper management, you're just right now everyone's checking and seeing how they create the best model for accessing this data. And that also is a part of the evaluation, right? So we're evaluating the data analysis and seeing it's meeting your BI needs. So obviously this is moving back and forth, right? This is fluid. You're testing. You might go back to the preparation stage. You might realize you have other different business questions you hadn't even thought of when you start to see how much data you have. Finally, there's the deployment stage, and this is about visualization. And really it's important for you to know how your users are going to consume the data. So it's great that you've cleaned the data, and it's great that you know what your questions are, but how is it going to be organized and presented in an easily digestible way? And how are you going to make sure, really, that you're increasing the knowledge of the data, and how it's presented, how often it's going to be updated, and how is it interactive, and how can you make it fluid so that now that you've set up the data modeling and the data cleansing and the blending and the warehousing of the data, how is this going to help your organization answer the questions that they need on a day-to-day basis? So obviously these are laid out very cleanly here, and it looks like this nice flow, but that's not how things always work in the real world. And a lot of businesses find they might be coming in at different points of these steps, right? So sometimes people start with deployment and the visualization. Right? We know what we want it to look like, and we know how we want people to interact with data, but now we need to go and set in the back end. On the other hand, sometimes organizations are coming in and they know what kind of data they have and they know how they need to store it and structure it, but then they reach a point where they realize they're not really sure how that's going to be deployed and how it's going to be visualized. So obviously it's not a perfect process, and again, that's why we brought Sager Creek on to really tell their story, because they're always improving, and they've had a lot of really great learnings here. So I wanted to put a slide in here because I love that everything starts with the data. So regardless of where you come in into this process of your analytic journey, but I think what everyone needs to keep in mind and what organizations need to keep in mind is that everything starts with the data. You need to figure out where you're putting the data, how you're going to visualize the data, and I think all business units, and no matter what side you're coming from, can agree on the fact that you need to make sure the data is clean, it's prepped, and how are we organizing it. And I think that's how teams really can come together and figure out their plan for the best possible BI. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Sager Creek. And we have Joseph and Dan on, and they're really going to talk about their journey and how Sager Creek has improved and is constantly improving their business intelligence.
Hi there, this is Joseph Portello.
And Dan Boyce.
Hope everyone's doing all right this morning, afternoon, or evening. We'll go ahead and jump right into this. So we were brought into Sager Creek when it had a change in hands from a former company. with a new executive team that wanted to develop a more agile methodology in BI solutions. When we arrived, BI existed as a downstream function. It really caught the crap from everything else. Everyone, they just print out reports from an AS400 Infinium system, set them in somebody's mailbox, and that was their daily reporting structure. It was hard to get a turnaround on reports unless you're at a certain level. There was no such thing as self-service BI. Data was hardly accessible with outside your own little sphere of influence. Pretty much a brick wall was put up between all the business units. It could take hours, days, or weeks for one single report to be generated and vetted between business units. And the data collection and storage was non-existent outside of the Infinium system.
So one of the things this is Dan, one of the things we really wanted to do was to, first of all, kind of break down the barriers between functions and make sure that people had access to the baseline data that they needed to run their specific operations, as well as see that in context of all of the other business units that they were either receiving data from or they were providing data to as part of their process. And so with that, we started to look for ways to make sure that all of that data was in a usable, consumable format. And that's where, different versions, and that's where we really started using Alteryx to go and hook to a lot of these various data sources and clean them up. And then we'd bring these business units in to, we have a room, we call it our war room. We literally sit them down and say, what is missing from here? And if we do find some missing pieces, we'd open up Alteryx right then and say, let's go pull this in and make sure that we've got all the data that we need in a consumable, data-friendly format, regardless of its source.
And just to put this into perspective, we didn't originally start with Alteryx. We started actually doing this by hand, doing data science with Python, using packages like Pandas and NumPy to bring the data in and together and store it in a MySQL database. As you can guess, that got really inefficient over time, especially with how small our team is, since we're only a group of 6. And with the data problems they had, we needed to scale up, and we needed to be a more flexible solution. So at that point, we did introduce Alteryx, as Dan was saying, and we started to scrum together the business units. We had a business owner who would come in, gather all the requirements, and be our main point of contact, and we just attacked the problem. And this is pre-Tableau. We went ahead and implemented Alteryx Gallery, a fantastic tool which let data get into the hands easily of individuals in like our warehouses, our distribution, example, our inventory system. I mean, for the first time ever, they had live inventory updates of what was actually coming out of their can lines or warehouse, whatever they could possibly want. As a MySQL storage solution, we didn't really want to have to deal with something internally. We didn't want to have to set up something in our data center and have that. We didn't want to manage it, pretty much. We just wanted it to be as simple as possible, just so we could prototype faster. So that's when we just started to try to discover and improve upon that, and we opted to move to a cloud-based environment for ops and storage. We experimented with various cloud-based data warehousing, examples being IBM's DashDB, Microsoft MPP SQL Data Warehouse. They have recently launched in Azure, hosted MySQL, Teradata's hosted solutions, and we found them all really kind of lacking in what we have for our business requirements. For the scale that we needed, how fast we needed it. All these pricing models were all over the place, and that's when we found Redshift to be the most probably reasonable solution for a company of our size and to go into the future as we grow. When we combine the two together, especially with Alteryx's in-database technology, we started to notice that our prototyping was only getting faster and faster. And at that point, we found we kind of felt our golden solution right there. To give an example of what we finally came to, here's an idea of what our architecture kind of looks like. You have a set coming from very standard. Everything feeds in through Alteryx, loaded into S3 and copied into Redshift, and then fed back into Tableau to be viewed by our users. To put into perspective the in-database functionality, the primary benefit that we received with Redshift, as I said before, was the in-database blending. We saw our workflow times reduced from 45 minutes to under 2 minutes, and that's a huge increase in our time and our prototyping time. When we were able to do this, our predictive analytic models were able to run faster, more efficiently. So we're looking at higher turnaround times and things like our production tracker, which identify variances instead of it being a every hour and a half thing. It became an every 5-minute thing, and that allowed for rapid corrections in our plants of issues. Our data streaming functionality is allowed to transfer from in-database to external or vice versa, however you want to do it. So, they really got you covered on all ends between Redshift, Alteryx, and Tableau. Here's an example workflow of something in database. This is one of our early models for something that we call demand LE. Many of you are hopefully familiar with what that is. Originally, when we had separated this workflow out, it could take upwards of an hour and 45 minutes to run. It now runs in under 8 minutes. And this generates pretty much everything that we can think of for our company as far as it goes from sales statistics to demand analysis, plan over plan views. It's a great data set. Does a lot of corrections in the process because, the data coming out of a lot of units, it's not perfect, and, we never expect it to be. But that's why we're here on this end, correcting that data, cleansing it in the process, and doing it all in database with Redshift.
So one of the things that we're really kind of hyper-focused on is what business question or business problem that we're really trying to solve. And a lot of this, especially in a business with food manufacturing, that a lot of these questions that we're answering, they're not academic in nature. They really drive the behaviors either in facilities or in the planning group. And the quicker that we can give solutions, the more likely it is we're gonna be able to propose the next better behaviors or set of behaviors. And as all these things that Joseph has been talking about have all been kicked off by a business need. And so this is, we've been able to do a lot of these things, but it's always with a business function or a business process sitting down with us saying, these are the types of questions that I need to answer. This is the data set I have in front of me right now. What's the next best way to do this? And so with one of those, of course, one of those areas is in demand planning. And as we're building these data sets, as we're converting to in-database for some of these large flows, we're very quickly able to deploy these learnings via Tableau so that decisions can be made and different options can be put in front of the executive team. And that's something that we're continually kind of in our data sets, making sure that we can show those models. And that's another thing that we're really cognizant of. Something that Redshift brings us is we are doing these data sets in such a way that we can always show the trend of the results of our own modeling behavior, so that we can show do these behaviors move us in the right direction, and can we see what the last 5 versions were versus the one that we're on right now, to give everybody the confidence, both visually and down at the transaction level, that we're behaving in such a way that we're moving towards the overall goals of the company.
Yeah, like any company, it's all about self-improvement. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're looking at, self-improvement for EBITDA, self-improvement for data processing. In the end, it's all about correcting mistakes before they get out of control. And this tool set allows you to rapidly do that. One other place that we've had great success in was distribution.
So this is, we're shipping products across the country that are heavy and expensive to move, and every marginal improvement really brings a huge return. And so something that would be kind of that rapid prototyping development that Joseph has been talking about is when we talk about where our distribution centers are, where our manufacturing footprint is, where our customers are, and being able to build 10 different versions off of a model and stack those in Redshift, and then go out and use and publish those to our analysts. And our analysts are hitting that data set and saying, of these 10 different combinations or 10 different options, which one is the best? And is there something that we can learn about moving stuff around so that we can take advantage of something that we just, a lot of times I say we have all this information, we just haven't been able to consume it fast enough to get to the next best solution or the next best proposal. And this method of rapid scenario development, putting it in Redshift and making sure our analyst community has access to a solid data set in real time has really allowed us to get quicker to the next best option, the next best solution.
So as mentioned before, we do run predictive analysis. Alteryx has tons of built-in tools that allow us to rapidly prototype our models, or any kind of model we design, linear regressions, named days, whatever we want, and apply them to certain business units.
So as we do that, a lot of this around is really kind of matching up our demand cycles with our manufacturing footprint. So a lot of these predictive analytics, especially in the business that we're in, we are manufacturing a product that is an agricultural-based product. So there's lots of seasonality, lots of variables that the better handle we have on those, the better we're going to be able to take advantage with weather, with yields, with the seasonality of some of these products. And that's exactly what we're doing, using these predictive analytic tools and running them in database in Redshift, and being able to very rapidly put models together to give our operational and our logistics teams, our sales teams, an idea of what the range is they're working with, so that we can kind of use our own internal risk tolerance meter to put together different scenarios when certain triggers are met. And those are all embedded in these predictive tools that we're building in our models and running in database out on Redshift. And it's one thing, it's a really interesting thing as we're moving some of the computational cycles from our internal MRP systems out to Redshift. We're seeing a really big improvement on our own internal systems as we're able to take more advantage of something that's rapidly scalable, such as Redshift. It's been a kind of a fun transition to watch over time as we move more and more of these questions out to Redshift and really standardize how we're publishing that data out to our analysts and our business units, and allowing them to interact, and kind of that self-service analytics that Joseph mentioned earlier has really, it's kind of raised the bar internally as far as the skill sets that we're asking our people to employ, but it's also making sure there's a lot wider distribution of just some of the base knowledge that's required of our specific business and what we're doing.
So one thing we were asked to go over was data governance itself. And, that obviously includes security of the data and bringing the data together. So we view our data sets as a whole product. As we scale the process, including new sets and features requests. The Scrum Master himself is responsible for identifying and elimination of it, like a basic Scrum process.
So one of the things that we're doing as we do that, something that one of those kind of cultural questions that we came into here at Sager Creek was through this Scrum process, really build these data sets that were very cross-functional, that met the needs of a very wide and diverse number of verticals within Sager Creek, and sometimes internal and external customers of this data. And that's really, as we built these things, Alteryx has allowed us to kind of build these in stages as needs came up and automate the maintenance of these. And then also, when we publish these data sets to Redshift for kind of consumption by our analyst layer, they can actually see the progression, and we're actually publishing, hey, here are the changes since last week, or here are the changes since the last publication, and here are the primary customers and the primary individuals inside Sager Creek that are kind of the subject matter experts for those data points, because everyone's kind of learning a new way and getting a little bit out of their comfort zone, because these data sets, they're servicing more needs, internal and external needs, than we were previously, even 6 months ago. So with that comes a little bit of growth in the understanding on how other groups can utilize that data, but we're getting the return on that is just a lot broader and deeper understanding of how that data impacts our business functions, and we're just getting. And for me, the judge is: are we changing behavior? Are we getting individuals to do something different tomorrow than they were today? And is that resulting in the result? Is it closer to the results that we've been asked to from our executive team?
One thing we requested, was to talk a little more about the actual tool set itself of Alteryx, and just so everyone here understands a little better about just how it actually works. And so, as you can see from this workflow real quick, that we're pulling in multiple data sources from our data warehouse from different dimensions, like our forecast, our historical orders, what current open orders reside within our systems, extended order data, and you can kind of see how simple this is. I think it's a flow. It's straight down. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to bring in these orders. I'm going to join them together. I'm going to union them, and then I'm going to filter some specific criteria, and then see the little checkbox. I'm going to select some data. I'm going to make sure I'm only getting what I want to actually come out of this process. Building something like this only takes me about 4 minutes, as opposed to actually coding it by hand in SQL, which would take me quite a considerable amount of time comparatively. And with stuff like this, being able to build it out, run it real fast, test what's coming out, and browse the data real quick, and then just turn around and completely wipe the floor and alter it again, and within seconds I'm testing a brand new application that built upon the framework of what I just built. It's incredibly powerful. It's one of the best tools I've ever used. Alteryx definitely knows how to push forward with data blending and enhancement and cleansing. Dan, do you have anything that you want to add?
So in that respect, and one of the, again, from a benefits perspective, when I'm in meetings with our executive team and when I'm sitting down with some of our functions, that question of what's your biggest pain point, and then what's the data that you would require? What's kind of a blank slate? What is everything you would ever need to know to be able to solve this on a daily basis, on a minute-by-minute basis, on a month, whatever that time scale is. And then the next question is, where is it right now? Are you going to 20 different places? Are you running 4 different reports? Are you having to, report A is in a different, is in a calendar month and report B is in a fiscal month and they don't match, and are you having to spend a lot of your time just in my mind, it's just complete waste. You're doing all of this background activity before you can even start to do the function or the process that you're being paid to do. And that's really kind of where we start with the types of screen that Joseph has up here right now, is we'll go in that kind of Scrum process, and sometimes it's in an MRP system, sometimes it's on some random person's hard drive. It's like, well, let's move that spreadsheet to a network location so that we can hit it with Alteryx and blend it with this and automate all of that. And then once we've got that data set, and by building that, we've also got a process to update that data set tomorrow and the next day, then we can really start solving their problem. And the speed at which we can do that inside a single business unit, as well as across the entire company with multiple business units, maybe with a streamlined function that flows through multiple business units in a given week or month, that is really where the power comes. And as we get that data prepped, as we get it quality checked, what Joseph mentioned, that's when we go and automate the whole thing, put it out on Redshift, and then it's like, okay, function A or function B, this data source is ready for you to hit with your analysts and start to rebuild your business processes based on real or relative real-time data. And it's then that kind of process, the faster we can do that, the better we get to the next best solution, whatever problem we're working on.
So one thing in our future that as a group that we are doing is we're going to continue to evolve this as best we can. We want to make it faster. I mean, how can we make our processes faster, and how can we use the tools to do so? We are constantly attempting to automate anything we possibly can, and especially with Alteryx, Redshift, Tableau, that's definitely not a problem. Between the prototyping and the automation, we're looking at business day turnaround times for some of this stuff. And we definitely want our number one mission to be a service-driven group that continues to be responsible for driving decision-making. We want our answers to be the ones that the executives say, yes, that makes sense. Let's do that. And we want to be the most reliable group that we possibly can be. Dan, did you have anything else?
I don't think so.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to Michael Ruiz from Amazon.
Okay, well, thanks, Joseph and Dan. As mentioned, this is Mike Ruiz. I'm a solutions architect with the partner team working for Amazon Web Services. And I'm just going to spend a couple minutes here talking about Amazon Redshift, which is one of the components of the architecture that the Sager Creek folks were talking about a few minutes ago. Let me go pretty quick. Redshift is pretty complex, has a lot of features. At the end of this little presentation, you'll find some links for a deeper dive. Anyway, Amazon Redshift is a simple, fast, petabyte-scale data warehousing solution. Offers it as a service for about $1,000 per terabyte per year. It's data warehousing done the AWS way, which means it's offered as a managed service. And the intent is to remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting that a customer might do with managing an on-prem or a wholly owned data warehouse solution where the customer is responsible for the hardware and the software. Amazon is going to take the burden of managing the hardware, managing the software and the software updates, creating workflows to easily provision the cluster, to resize the cluster, to back the cluster up, and leave the customer with the option of really deriving the business value out of their data. It's a pay-as-you-go solution with no upfront costs. So as your analytics needs scale and your data volumes scale, you can scale the cluster up. If they decrease over time, you can scale the cluster down. And so you're always paying for exactly what you're using with the solution. It's fast. It can be up to 10 times faster than equivalent on-prem solutions using existing technologies or existing stacks. It's cheap, as mentioned. It's a pay-as-you-go solution with significant TCO benefits in terms of administration as well. And it's easy to use. We spend a lot of time building console tools and automated workflows that are available through the console or a CLI or through an API. We make it easy to integrate, and our partners have built great solutions to integrate with Redshift to make it easy to use the solution and really drive that business value. And finally, it's SQL enabled. So you can use your existing tooling in many cases and existing visualization tools and BI tools to integrate with Redshift without a transformation. So as mentioned, Redshift is going to scale with your use. So you can start with something as small as a single DW1 extra large node, which is just 2 cores, 16 gigs of RAM, and 2 terabytes of data. So you can have a single node Redshift cluster to do some experimentation, or in many cases, this might actually satisfy your analytics requirements. As your needs grow or your data volume grows, you can scale that cluster out up to 32 nodes on that particular instance type. If you exceed that core or memory requirement or data requirement, you can switch to a different node instance type and grow it all the way out to 1.6 petabytes and 1,600 cores, as you can see. These are online operations enabled through the console or through the API, so you don't need to build automation to resize your cluster. We'll do that for you. The cluster will be in read-only mode while it's rebuilding. Importantly, though, you can reverse those errors, so you can shrink the cluster, as your needs change over time. Amazon Redshift is tightly integrated with the rest of the AWS ecosystem. Critically, it's integrated with an object store called S3. S3 was one of the first AWS solutions released in 2006, and it's a massively scalable parallel object store. Redshift can use Amazon S3 or other technologies like it to hydrate itself, make multiple copies, to make Redshift available in other Amazon regions, even totally different geographic localities, like you can move the instantiate Redshift clusters in Europe based on snapshots stored in Amazon S3. You can also, it's integrated through tools like Alteryx with on-prem data sources. So you can take your on-prem flat files or your on-prem data warehouse or on-prem databases, transform that data or blend the data with a product like Alteryx, upload it into Redshift, and then output it to your existing analytics flows. So I think Sager Creek mentioned Tableau, lots of other services like that to visualize your data. And you can use this in a way similar to your existing workflow or create an entirely new workflow based around Amazon Redshift. So common customer use cases, you can use Redshift to extend an on-prem data warehouse. So rather than go through a hardware procurement loop, which could take weeks or months, you can extend a data warehouse solution, by moving certain analytics workloads and data up to Redshift and working on it there. You can experiment with different ways to look at data without affecting your existing on-prem data warehouse. So, data warehouses are pretty valuable commodity, but you might have an idea for a novel analytics use case. You can move the data up to S3 or use products like Alteryx, hydrate a Redshift cluster, do that experimentation, and then when you're finished, you can decommission the cluster. So cost of innovation is very low. Companies with big data but no existing on-prem data warehouse may find challenges doing analytics within their existing infrastructure. So you either got data retention issues, you can't keep all the data that you want online, or you're staring in the face of standing up a pretty expensive and lengthy process to stand up an on-prem data warehouse to accommodate those workloads. So it's another enabling technology. You can move that data out to Redshift. And finally, SaaS companies are finding products like managed service products like Redshift key components to their offerings. So SaaS companies can build solutions around analytics and using managed services like Redshift. You can have multiple clusters. You can have clusters of any size and resize it as the SaaS as your customer needs vary and change over time. And by doing that, we believe you can reduce your hardware and software costs by at least an order of magnitude. Finally, we have quite a few customers on Amazon Redshift, and these are a few examples of customers that find it Redshift a pretty easy to use solution. So Fender says our team was able to provision Redshift in a matter of hours versus weeks, versus weeks with on-premise services. And this is actually something that we hear kind of a lot. Customers used to standing up POCs or efforts that span months. might find that they're finished within a week or two and have a lot of time at the end of the process to kind of refine their process or work on the analytics. The hardware problems are generally solved within a few days. And as mentioned, here's some more resources to go dive in. The best resource, as always, is going to be the website for Redshift. You can go to the Redshift website to dig into the developer documentation and more features, architectural samples, as well as the compliance. You can build HIPAA and PCI compliant workloads on Redshift, and we've got statements of certification around those types of efforts on the website. For a longer form presentation and webinar, I encourage you to look at that SF Summit presentation. You can search our YouTube channel, the AWS YouTube channel for that. It really dives in on the Redshift architecture and uncovers a lot of workloads and workflows that you might find interesting. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Maimoona with Alteryx.
Thanks, Mike. So I want to here just to talk briefly about Alteryx. We're a leader in data blending and advanced analytics, and everything is done in a drag and drop workflow. So you saw Sager Creek and Dan and Joseph demonstrate all the tools are pulled in there. So whether you're doing cleansing, joining, or analytics, it's all done in this workflow. We have over 1,000+ customers across the world. A lot with Redshift. People are finding some really great success there. And as well as Tableau. We have over 400 Tableau joint customers. And we integrate with other visualization tools such as Qlik or Power BI. But again, Sager Creek has been using Tableau with great results, as you've heard. I won't get too much into this, but we have a 98% renewal rate. So I think that speaks for itself. That's why we like to speak about that number. This is a recap. As you saw, we saw Sager Creek. Alteryx can really take all relevant data, can blend with almost any source together. And again, that's just using one tool or two tools in a workflow. Something I wanted to talk about was these workflows are iterative and reiterative. So you can operationalize your data blending, and you can maybe have one data analyst who's doing a lot of the data blending work and then feeding it out to multiple groups for multiple scenarios. We also have a way to enrich our data, again, all being pulled in with some easy drag and drop tools. So we have data you can bring in from Experian, from TomTom, from the Census Bureau. So this is an additional package, and a lot of people use this obviously for marketing research and things of that nature. We also have a very great predictive and geospatial tools. All our predictive tools are based on R. But you don't need to know how to code. So there's two options here. You can pull the tool in for predictive analytics, such as linear regression, but you don't need to know how to code. On the other hand, if you or someone on your team knows how to R code, there is the option to go in there and change the code or rewrite the code. So it's very, very fluid and very flexible for many scenarios. Geospatial, we have a lot of customers who are using these tools. Again, super easy with drag and drop for drive time location and store retail location and things of that nature. And finally, as you've heard, it's really important to get the data out and make sure your internal users, or if you want to call them customers, are accessing the data and getting the most up-to-date data. So we do integrate with Tableau, as we've seen Sager Creek is using, and again with Power BI as well as Qlik. So each of these pieces is really important on the journey to your business analytics. So if you'd like to learn more, right, it's available at www.alteryx.com. We have two separate sections for some of the other partners Sager Creek is using that you see mentioned here. We have a section that can give you some more use cases on how people are using Amazon Web Services, Redshift, S3, et cetera, and also how some of our customers, again, over 400 successful joint customers for Tableau. You can see some of the use cases there as well. And we break that down into data blending examples as well as predictive analytic examples, and you can see some very specific geospatial usage or predictive usage. And with that, I will turn it back over to Bill.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks for that really excellent presentation. So let's get started with today's Q&A session. And I particularly want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in during the presentation. And we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. So during this Q&A session, I'll leave up this screen, which has the contact information for our panelists, so that you can contact them directly following today's webinar. So let's get started. This question clearly is directed to Joseph and Dan, but an awful lot of our audience members recognized what a huge effort it was to move this entire group of systems onto the web. There are barriers in terms of time and security and business process and culture and politics. Would you all tell us which ones of those were the toughest and how you dealt with them?
So this is Dan. I'm gonna at least start to tackle that one. The biggest barrier to that was a cultural one. There's just a lot of ingrained business processes that I always say that a lot of data processes are like pouring concrete. That once you've actually poured that concrete and you start to do some stuff, it just starts to harden. People start to get used to dealing with that way. They get used to the way that certain reports look and feel, and of course we're resistant to change. So a lot of that was around not only kind of telling people that this process was going to be faster and more accurate, but demonstrating that. And a lot of our ability with this specific tool set to relatively cheaply be able to do a quick proof of concept and show your current approved process versus what it looks like when we've put together an Alteryx workflow. We're doing some very high-level analysis in real time and making sure that all that data is available in real time to the entire company via what we're posting on Redshift and publishing to our data layer. That was a huge win as we are starting to make headway in kind of making sure that we are selling internally our ability to turn around data faster, quicker, higher quality, and all that stuff.
Terrific. Hey, thank you so much. What about just the cloud aspect, the AWS Cloud? Was that a particular separate cultural issue or a security issue for you?
Luckily for us, our IT team is we're very progressive, and we move forward as quickly as possible. Especially when we really look at it in the needs of the business when it comes to cost, effectiveness, ease of use and management. And just for us, it clicked. It made sense. It was one of those things that seemed the stars aligned, and we honestly didn't have trouble with the plan itself on migrating it. The approvals went through. I mean, honestly, that was probably the easiest part of it all, was getting everything to the cloud. It was the cultural barriers that were the worst.
Oh, well, thanks for that excellent answer. Now, Alteryx clearly is well known for its blending capability. Can you tell us how many different data sources are you blending, and how do they line up in terms of volume and variety and even velocity?
So a good example is, when we arrived here in this Infinium AS400 system, I mean, it was everywhere. The AS400 operates a lot differently than a lot of other systems. These files were broken apart. Just an example, we have a product item master, of course, like most companies. And our product item master is actually made up of almost 10 to 15 disparate sources from within the company. So we had to bring that all together to actually generate a real viable product item master to use. And, that's luckily all automated and done now. It generates for us every day. All new items are added every night. So we're looking at something like that, that's the norm for us, 10 to 15 each time that we're generating master data sources. The biggest volume I think we've dealt with is probably between 15 to 20 million rows. Looking at our size, that's about appropriate. We're about to start taking on some other projects, which you see that multiplied by up to about 100 million to 150 million rows regarding some other of our business units and our parent company.
Terrific. Hey, thank you. Now, toward the end of the presentation, we heard Maimoona talk about the predictive analytic resources that are available within Alteryx as well as R. But I imagine that you have at least two distinct consumer groups. One of them must be the data science trained folks, and the other are the non-data science trained folks. So can you tell us a little bit about the tools that the data science folks are using? That is, are they using principally the stuff that Alteryx provided, or R, or still a third-party plan? And on the consumer side, is it mostly Tableau that they're using, or how, for instance, are you producing crystal-like banded reports or text window reports?
So I think your hypothesis is largely correct. With our analysts and our BI team, we are using a lot of those predictive tools inside Alteryx, especially as we're kind of out in experimentation mode, as we're trying to look for that next better way, and as we kick ideas around internally. But as we kind of move across that line into our main customer sets, and most of those customer sets are internal non-data people, we are, most of that, and really all of that, is through Tableau dashboards that are interactive, and they're functionally divided up, at least on the tabs themselves. We're really trying to, another thing that we're trying to kind of influence culturally is to publish data sets that are not just, for example, not just produce a finance report, but actually have a finance and operations and logistics and inventory all as part of the same report deck, so that everybody's consuming their data in context of the business process or the business environment that we're really trying to influence behavior in or report behavior out of. So that's so internally, our BI team very much using predictive analytics inside Alteryx, but outside there, publishing through Tableau server.
Terrific, terrific. Thanks for that response. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're organized for BI? How many analysts or data science types do you have, and roughly how many consumers are you serving?
Yeah, so we've got it divided up into what I consider our ETL or our Alteryx team. Internally we call ourselves the ETL, extract, transform, load, and so we've got three of those that are really supporting the entire company. And so I don't know who said it, but we're really making sure that those individuals, they're supporting a pretty wide cross section of the company. And right now we've got 3 to 4. Because we're sharing some resources kind of on what I call our analysts, and so they're supporting sales and demand and financial reporting and stuff like that. And then we've got 4 or 5 people embedded in business units that are out that report up to the respective business units that we've trained, and we have a continual kind of improvement process that they consume the data sources, and they provide the information tools for their business functions.
Thank you. Thanks. That's very clear. Hey, just a real simple technical question has come in. Is Alteryx running on a local server, or is that running on AWS as well?
Alteryx is running on AWS.
Okay, terrific. Well, hey, thank you all for those great answers to some very good questions. For those of you who asked questions that were not answered today, we'll be sending all unanswered questions to our panelists and the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. Please mark your calendars for November 10th. That's our next DCS webinar. From visual analysis to presentation, that's going to be sponsored by Tableau. Also, remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today and can be found on the home page of datasciencecentral.com in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. So that brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship, and our speakers today, Dan Boyce, Joseph Portello, Michael Ruiz, and Maimoona for their insight into today's topic. My name is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event, and I look forward to seeing you all again on November 10th. Have a great day.